Thunder crashes across the darkening skies of medieval Japan. Rain pours in torrents, turning the mountain paths into treacherous mudslides. Through this tempest, a small band of warriors moves silently, their armor soaked, their spirits unbroken. At their head rides a young warlord, barely 26 years old, who's about to change the course of history. The date is June 12, 1560. The place, the foggy valleys near Okehazama. And what's about to unfold will become one of the most extraordinary military victories ever recorded. A tale that rivals the legendary stand of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae. This young warlord is Oda Nobunaga, a man dismissed by his enemies as the fool of Owari. But today, he will prove them all wrong. With just 300 samurai, he's about to take on an army of 10,000 men. The odds? 33 to 1. In modern terms, imagine a small college football team taking on the combined might of every NFL franchise simultaneously. But this isn't just a story about numbers. It's a tale of innovation versus tradition, of cunning versus complacency, and of how weather, terrain, and sheer audacity combined to create the perfect storm of military genius. The opposing force is led by Imagawa Yoshimoto, a powerful daimyo from the east. Imagawa's army is a sight to behold. Thousands of samurai in gleaming armor, hundreds of cavalry, and enough supplies to sustain a small city. Their camp stretches across the valley like a mobile metropolis, banners snapping in the wind, campfires dotting the landscape like earthbound stars. Imagawa's goal is ambitious: march on the capital, Kyoto, and seize control of Japan. Standing in his way is only the small province of Owari, controlled by the upstart Oda clan. To Imagawa, this is merely a speed bump on his road to glory. His intelligence reports tell him that the young Oda lord has fled in terror, abandoning his castle of Kyosu. This matches everything Imagawa knows about Nobunaga, a wild youth who spent more time falconing and watching plays than studying military strategy. What Imagawa doesn't know is that he's walking into one of the most brilliantly conceived traps in samurai history. Let's rewind slightly. Earlier that morning, Nobunaga had gathered his retainers at Kyosu Castle. The mood was grim. Many advocated surrendering. After all, how could 300 stand against 10,000? But Nobunaga saw something others didn't. He understood that Imagawa's greatest strength, his massive army, could become his greatest weakness. In a move that shocked his men, Nobunaga began to dance. Yes, dance. As his warriors watched in bewilderment, their lord performed the kusamai, a traditional war dance, while singing, "A man's life is but 50 years under heaven. If one lives to be 70, he is blessed. Would you spend your days cowering like a dog, or would you rise and bloom like a flower?" This wasn't mere theatrics. Nobunaga understood something fundamental about leadership. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is confidence itself. His dance transformed the mood in the castle. If their lord could be so calm, so assured in the face of certain death, then perhaps there was hope after all. But Nobunaga had more than just bravado up his sleeve. He had spent years studying the terrain around his domain. He knew every valley, every hidden path, every potential battleground. And most importantly, he understood human nature. He knew that an army of 10,000 would become complacent, especially when they believed their enemy had fled. The storm that now raged across the battlefield wasn't just weather. It was opportunity. While Imagawa's massive force huddled in their camps, seeking shelter from the deluge, Nobunaga's small band moved with purpose. They used the rain as cover, the thunder to mask their movement, and the terrain to their advantage. Through the eyes of Mori Yoshinari, one of Nobunaga's trusted captains, we can glimpse the tension of that approach. The mud sucking at their horses' hooves, the rain streaming down their armor, the knowledge that discovery would mean instant death. Yet they moved forward, guided by scouts who had spent days marking the path with paper lanterns. now nearly invisible in the downpour. What follows will become the stuff of legend, a masterclass in military deception, timing, and the power of decisive action. But to understand how 300 warriors could possibly defeat an army 33 times their size, we need to dive deeper into the mind of Oda Nobunaga, the man who would eventually be known as the first great unifier of Japan. The art of war isn't just about weapons and numbers. It's about seeing opportunities where others see obstacles. And on that rain-soaked June day, Oda Nobunaga was about to demonstrate this principle in spectacular fashion. Picture the Imagawa camp. 10,000 warriors, their armor and weapons worth a fortune, spread across the valley in what they believed was an impregnable position. The rain had turned their celebration into misery. Many samurai had removed their armor, seeking comfort from the downpour. Others had turned to sake to warm themselves. Their commanders, convinced of victory, had relaxed their guard. This was exactly what Nobunaga had predicted. But his genius went beyond just exploiting weather conditions. He had spent the previous week executing a masterful deception campaign that would have made Sun Tzu proud. First, he had ordered his castle at Kiyosu to maintain normal activities, lights burning through the night, guards making their regular rounds, even smoke rising from the kitchens. This created the illusion that he was holed up inside, paralyzed with fear. Meanwhile, he had dispatched small groups of warriors to light fires on distant hillsides, suggesting a larger force was gathering, but in the wrong direction. But perhaps his most brilliant strategy was psychological. Nobunaga understood that his reputation as the Fool of Owari was actually his greatest asset. Who would expect a military masterpiece from a man known for his eccentric behavior? As one of his surviving retainers later wrote, "The enemy's contempt is your greatest weapon." As Nobunaga's small force approached the Imagawa position, they encountered their first real test. A group of enemy scouts was returning to camp. In most battles, this would spell disaster for such a small attacking force. But Nobunaga had prepared for this too. His men were wearing simplified armor with minimal insignia. In the rain and fog, they could easily be mistaken for Imagawa's own troops. The deception worked. The scouts passed by, nodding to what they thought were fellow soldiers. This moment of brilliant improvisation saved the mission and demonstrated why Nobunaga's men had such faith in their leader's plans. Now, let's break down the terrain that would become the stage for this extraordinary battle. The Imagawa army was spread through a narrow valley, their supply lines stretching back for miles. This formation, which seemed secure, was about to become a death trap. The surrounding hills, thick with vegetation and slick with rain, appeared impassable to any significant force, which is exactly why Imagawa's commanders had posted minimal guards there. But Nobunaga knew better. His men had spent years hunting in these hills. They knew every deer path, every hidden trail, every natural corridor through the wilderness. More importantly, they knew which slopes would remain stable even in heavy rain, and which would turn into treacherous slides. As his force approached their final position, Nobunaga gathered his commanders for last-minute instructions. His plan was audacious. They would split into 3 groups, approaching from different directions, creating the illusion of a much larger force. The main group, led by Nobunaga himself, would drive straight through the center of the camp, aiming for Imagawa's command post. This was the moment where history hung in the balance. One false step, one alarm raised too soon, and all would be lost. Nobunaga's men checked their weapons one final time. The rain continued to pour, but now it was their ally, masking their approach and dampening the enemy's ability to respond quickly. Then came the signal they had been waiting for, a distant drum roll, barely audible over the storm. But this was no enemy warning. This was the sound of thunder, nature itself seeming to announce the coming attack. Nobunaga turned to his men and spoke words that would be recorded in Japanese history. "The enemy is in the palm of my hand." The next few minutes would demonstrate why Nobunaga would eventually be remembered as one of Japan's greatest military commanders. His 300 warriors were about to unleash a chain of events that would shake the foundations of Japanese feudal power and change the course of history. What happened next was not just a battle. It was a perfect storm of strategy, timing, and controlled chaos. And it would demonstrate that in warfare, as in life, quality can triumph over quantity when combined with brilliant leadership and perfect execution. The attack began not with a war cry, but with silence. 300 warriors emerged from the fog like ghosts, moving through the rain in perfect coordination. The first Imagawa soldiers to die never even knew they were under attack. They simply disappeared into the storm, their final moments lost in the thunder. Imagine the scene. An enormous camp, spread across the valley floor, its occupants huddled against the rain. Then, suddenly, chaos erupts from 3 directions at once. Nobunaga's main force struck from the north, while his other 2 groups attacked from the east and west. The effect was devastating. In the rain and confusion, it seemed like a massive army was descending from all sides. The genius of Nobunaga's attack lay in its timing and target selection. His men didn't waste time engaging regular troops. Instead, they moved like lightning towards specific objectives, command posts, unit leaders, and key strategic positions. This wasn't just violence, it was surgery with swords. One of Nobunaga's commanders, Mori Yoshinari, later described the scene. "We moved through their camp like a blade through silk. The rain masked our approach, and the enemy's own size worked against them. They couldn't tell friend from foe, and in their confusion they began striking at their own men." The Imagawa army's massive size, which should have been its greatest strength, became its greatest weakness. Messages couldn't be passed effectively through the chaos. Units couldn't coordinate their responses. The chain of command, stretched across the lengthy encampment, completely broke down. Think of it like a modern football stadium during a power outage, but with swords and spears. The confusion and panic spread faster than any actual combat. In many cases, Imagawa units were attacking each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe in the rain and growing darkness. At the heart of the camp, Imagawa Yoshimoto remained unaware of the true nature of the attack. When he first heard the commotion, he allegedly believed it was just his own troops having a drunken skirmish. This fatal misunderstanding would cost him his life. According to surviving accounts, Yoshimoto emerged from his command tent to investigate the disturbance. He was reportedly in a relaxed mood, having spent the afternoon enjoying sake and poetry with his senior commanders. The scene that followed would become legendary in Japanese military history. 2 of Nobunaga's samurai, Mori Shinsuke and Hattori Koheta, had fought their way through the chaos to reach Yoshimoto's position. They found him standing outside his tent, still believing he was dealing with unruly subordinates. The Imagawa lord's final words were reportedly, "What's all this commotion about?" The answer came in the form of steel. Both samurai struck simultaneously, their swords finding their mark before Yoshimoto's guards could react. The great daimyo fell, and with him fell the future he had imagined, of leading an army to Kyoto and becoming the ruler of all Japan. But the death of Yoshimoto didn't immediately end the battle. What followed was perhaps even more remarkable than the initial attack. As news of their lord's death spread through the Imagawa ranks, something unprecedented happened. Instead of rallying and using their superior numbers to crush the attackers, the mighty army began to dissolve. This wasn't just a retreat. It was a complete collapse of one of medieval Japan's most powerful armies. Soldiers threw down their weapons and fled. Commanders abandoned their posts. The rain-soaked valley became a scene of total chaos as 10,000 warriors tried to escape through narrow mountain paths. Nobunaga's men, still maintaining their disciplined formation, systematically took control of key escape routes. They didn't need to kill everyone, they just needed to maintain the illusion of being everywhere at once. The fleeing Imagawa troops did the rest, spreading panic and confusion as they ran. The battle, if it can even be called that, was over in less than 2 hours. When the rain finally cleared, the valley of Okehazama had witnessed one of the most lopsided victories in military history. The mighty Imagawa army, which had set out to conquer Japan, had been shattered by a force 1/30th its size. The morning after the battle, the sun rose on a transformed landscape. The valley of Okehazama, which had witnessed one of history's most remarkable military victories, lay silent except for the crows. The rain had stopped, but its effects remained. Abandoned weapons, scattered armor, and fallen banners half buried in mud told the story of the previous day's chaos. But the true impact of what had happened here would extend far beyond this valley. In a single afternoon, Oda Nobunaga had accomplished what many thought impossible. He had destroyed one of Japan's most powerful armies and eliminated a major rival for control of central Japan. The ripple effects would transform Japanese history. Let's put this victory in perspective. Imagine if a small-town sheriff and a handful of deputies had somehow managed to defeat the entire U.S. Army. That's the scale of what happened at Okehazama. The victory was so complete, so unexpected, that many initially refused to believe the news. In the immediate aftermath, Nobunaga's actions revealed why he would eventually become Japan's greatest unifier. Instead of pursuing the fleeing Imagawa troops to annihilate them completely, he made a series of strategic decisions that would prove crucial for his future ambitions. First, he ordered his men to gather all the abandoned weapons and armor, a treasure trove of military equipment that would help arm his future armies. But more importantly, he issued a surprising order. Any Imagawa soldiers who wished to join his forces would be welcomed. This wasn't just mercy, it was brilliant strategic thinking. Many of these warriors were experienced veterans, and within weeks, Nobunaga's army had grown significantly. The battlefield itself yielded other valuable prizes. Among the captured items was Imagawa Yoshimoto's personal war banner and his military archives, documents containing detailed information about alliances, fortifications, and troop strengths throughout central Japan. This intelligence would prove invaluable in the years to come. But perhaps the most significant immediate result was the effect on morale. Throughout Japan, the news spread like wildfire. A young fool with just 300 men had destroyed an army of 10,000. The psychological impact was enormous. As one contemporary chronicler wrote, after Okehazama, men began to whisper that perhaps the gods themselves fought alongside Nobunaga. The victory transformed Nobunaga's reputation overnight. No longer was he seen as the fool of a wari. Now he was recognized as a military genius. Warriors from across Japan began to flock to his banner, drawn by his growing reputation for innovative tactics and decisive leadership. Among these was a young samurai named Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who would later become one of Japan's most important historical figures. Hideyoshi, watching Nobunaga's rise to power, supposedly commented, "This is a man who makes the impossible possible." The battle also marked a turning point in Japanese military thinking. Traditional samurai warfare had emphasized individual combat and rigid codes of honor. Okehazama demonstrated the effectiveness of surprise, deception, and psychological warfare. It showed that victory didn't always go to the largest army, but to the one that best used its resources and understanding of human nature. In the months following Okehazama, Nobunaga consolidated his position. The Imagawa clan, once one of Japan's most powerful families, never recovered from this defeat. Their territories were gradually absorbed by their neighbors, and their name faded from prominence. It was as if a mighty oak had been felled by a single, perfectly placed strike. But Nobunaga wasn't content with just this victory. Okehazama had given him something perhaps even more valuable than territory. It had given him a reputation. In medieval Japan, where authority was often based on perception as much as reality, this was priceless. Other daimyo now had to consider, if Nobunaga could achieve this with just 300 men, what could he do with a full army? The Battle of Okehazama did more than just establish Oda Nobunaga as a military genius. It marked the beginning of Japan's transformation from a medieval society into what would eventually become a modern nation. Think of it as Japan's own shot heard round the world, a single event that triggered a cascade of changes that would reshape an entire country. In the years following Okehazama, Nobunaga emerged as Japan's most innovative leader. He broke with centuries of tradition, embracing new technologies and ideas in ways that would have shocked his contemporaries. Imagine a medieval European lord suddenly adopting modern business practices and military tactics. That's essentially what Nobunaga did. One of his first major innovations came directly from lessons learned at Okehazama. Traditional samurai warfare had been based on rigid rules and formal challenges. Nobunaga threw this playbook out the window. He recognized that victory went to the bold and innovative, not to those who clung to outdated traditions. This mindset led to revolutionary changes in Japanese warfare. Nobunaga became the first daimyo to fully embrace firearms, creating dedicated matchlock units that would transform Japanese battlefields. While other lords dismissed guns as unsamurai-like, Nobunaga saw them as tools of progress. He even established Japan's first gun manufacturing facilities, standardizing production in a way that wouldn't be seen in Europe for another century. But Nobunaga's innovations weren't limited to military matters. He recognized that true power in Japan required more than just military strength. It needed economic foundations. In another break with tradition, he abolished toll roads within his territories, encouraging free trade. He implemented a merit-based system of promotion, allowing talented commoners to rise to positions of authority, a radical concept in feudal Japan. Think of Nobunaga as Japan's first modernizer, a medieval version of Steve Jobs, breaking down old systems and rebuilding them in more efficient ways. He standardized weights and measures, established free markets, and protected merchants who had traditionally been looked down upon by the samurai class. One of his most dramatic innovations came in urban planning. In the city of Azuchi, Nobunaga built a castle town that would serve as a model for future Japanese cities. Unlike traditional Japanese castles, which were purely military installations, Azuchi combined military defense with commercial districts, residential areas, and religious centers. It was Japan's first planned city, complete with grid-patterned streets and designated commercial zones, concepts that wouldn't become common in Europe for centuries. The impact of these changes was profound. Regions under Nobunaga's control began to prosper in unprecedented ways. Merchants could travel freely, artisans could sell their goods in new markets, and common people had opportunities for advancement that had never existed before. It was as if someone had hit fast forward on Japan's development. Nobunaga also showed remarkable religious tolerance, protecting Christian missionaries and allowing them to establish churches in his territories. This wasn't due to any personal religious conviction. Rather, he recognized that European missionaries brought with them knowledge of advanced technologies and trading opportunities. It was a pragmatic decision that put Japan on the path to greater international engagement. But perhaps Nobunaga's greatest legacy was his vision of a unified Japan. Before Okehazama, Japan had been fractured into dozens of warring states, each jealously guarding its own traditions and privileges. Nobunaga saw beyond these divisions. He envisioned a centralized state with standardized laws, a unified economy, and a professional military, concepts that would eventually become the foundation of modern Japan. This vision was revolutionary for its time. Most medieval rulers sought simply to expand their territories. Nobunaga sought to transform the very nature of Japanese society. He understood that true unification required more than just military conquest. It needed administrative reform, economic development, and cultural change. The seeds planted at Okehazama would grow into a transformed Japan. Although Nobunaga himself would not live to see his vision fully realized, the changes he set in motion would continue under his successors, Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Together, these three men would be known as Japan's great unifiers, but it was Nobunaga who laid the foundation, and it all began with that rainy day in 1560. The Battle of Okehazama wasn't just a military victory, it was a masterclass in leadership, innovation, and the power of unconventional thinking. Its lessons echo through the centuries, offering insights that remain surprisingly relevant today. Consider what Nobunaga achieved. Facing overwhelming odds, he turned his apparent weaknesses into strengths. His small force became an advantage, allowing for stealth and mobility. The bad weather, which should have hindered his attack, became his ally. Even his reputation as a fool worked in his favor, leading his enemies to underestimate him fatally. These principles still apply in today's world. In business, we see small, agile startups disrupting massive corporations. In technology, innovative solutions often come from unexpected places. The lesson is clear. True advantage doesn't always lie in size or resources, but in how creatively and effectively you use what you have. Nobunaga's leadership style also offers timeless lessons. When his men were paralyzed by fear, he didn't give them a conventional pep talk, he danced. This seemingly bizarre action demonstrated supreme confidence and transformed his followers' mindset. It's a reminder that leadership isn't just about giving orders. It's about inspiring others and showing them what's possible. The battle also demonstrates the power of preparation and timing. Nobunaga's victory wasn't just luck. It was the result of meticulous planning, detailed knowledge of the terrain, and perfect execution. He knew that even the best plan needs the right moment to succeed. As one modern military historian noted, Okehazama wasn't won on the day of the battle. It was won in the months and years of preparation that came before. But perhaps the most significant lesson from Okehazama is about the nature of change itself. Nobunaga's victory marked the beginning of a transformation that would reshape Japan. It showed that sometimes a single decisive action can change the course of history. One battle, lasting less than 2 hours, set in motion changes that would eventually help create modern Japan. This has parallels throughout history. Think of moments like the Wright brothers' first flight, or the launch of the first iPhone, seemingly small events that triggered massive changes. Okehazama reminds us that transformation often begins with a single bold action. The story of Okehazama also challenges our assumptions about power and success. It shows that victory doesn't always go to the strongest or the largest, but often to those who can see opportunities where others see only obstacles. Nobunaga won not because he had the biggest army, but because he had the clearest vision and the courage to execute it. In the centuries since Okehazama, Japan has undergone many transformations. From the modernization of the Meiji period to its post-war economic miracle, the country has repeatedly shown an ability to adapt and innovate, qualities that were first demonstrated on that rainy day in 1560. Today, the battlefield of Okehazama is a quiet historical park. Stone markers and memorial tablets stand where once thousands of warriors clashed. But the spirit of innovation, courage, and strategic thinking that Nobunaga demonstrated lives on, offering lessons for anyone facing their own seemingly impossible challenges. The next time you face overwhelming odds in your own life, remember Okehazama. Remember that sometimes the biggest obstacles can become your greatest advantages. remember that innovation and unconventional thinking can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. And remember that, as Nobunaga proved, reputation and resources aren't nearly as important as vision and execution. History is full of battles and victories, but few offer as many lessons as this remarkable encounter. The Battle of Okehazama stands as a testament to the power of strategic thinking, innovative leadership, and the ability of a small force to change the course of history. As we conclude this remarkable story, consider how these lessons might apply to your own challenges and aspirations. After all, the principles that allowed 300 samurai to defeat an army of 10,000 might just help you overcome the obstacles in your path. Thank you for watching this examination of one of history's most extraordinary military victories. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales from Japanese history. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. Have thoughts about Nobunaga's innovative tactics or other amazing historical battles? Share them in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. And remember, sometimes the greatest victories come not from having the most resources, but from having the courage to use what you have in unexpected ways. See you in our next historical adventure.